Is there a problem here? Identifying and defining problems. At this point, you've learned a lot about the process of critical thinking. You've learned how to identify arguments and their parts, how to evaluate both the parts and the whole argument, and what common mistakes you need to be aware of when evaluating arguments made by others or crafting your own argument. Now it's time to think about how to apply critical thinking. Specifically, you'll learn how to apply critical thinking in the real world, your education, in your personal life, and the professional realm. Remember, the purpose of critical thinking is to apply reason in order to figure out what you should believe and therefore what you should do. Using your critical thinking skills is all about being able to decide where you stand on a given issue and then, based on that position, taking or not taking certain action. When presented with a choice or problem, why not just make a decision and run with it? Why bother to take the time to think critically? In this set of episodes, you're going to learn more about the problems and issues people face in personal, social, economic, political, and professional settings. You'll need to consider the diverse, complex, and challenging issues people face, as well as the many diverse opinions and perspectives people have on what to do about those issues. In order to deal with this complexity and diversity, we'll show you a reliable way to evaluate issues fully, assess the alternative solutions, and make decisions. You can apply critical thinking to real-world issues by taking the steps that move you from an issue or problem to an action. Generally, there are 5 key steps in this process, the process of problem solving. 1. Specify or identify the problem. In critical thinking terms, this would be stating the issue that an argument is meant to address. 2. Analyze the problem. This step involves gathering knowledge about the issue at hand. You can think of it as looking for premises that tell you something about the problem. 3. Formulate possible solutions. Craft an argument. Use the premises you discovered in your analysis of the issue to build an argument. Note that at this stage, you may have come up with multiple conclusions or solutions based on different ways of combining or applying the premises. 4. Evaluate the possible solutions. Here, you're looking at each argument to figure out how strong or weak it is. A good way to do this is by examining the premises you came up with for their truth or acceptability, relevance, and sufficiency. 5. Choose a solution. Decide which argument is the strongest based on your evaluation and use that argument as a basis for taking action. The previous modules have given you the skills needed to engage in analysis, evaluation, and selection. In this episode, you will learn more about the first step, figuring out what issues actually need to be dealt with. Before we can move on to all those other steps, we need to believe that there is a problem in the first place, and we need to clearly and directly state what that problem is. Deciding when there's a problem may seem obvious or easy. Doesn't everyone know whether something is a problem? Not always. Disagreements about whether there is a problem that needs to be addressed occur all the time. Imagine you realize you have 3 midterm exams, all on the same day. Now, most students would look at this as a problem. How could I possibly study and be prepared for all 3 exams at once? Thinking that this is a serious issue that does need to be addressed, you approach one of your professors and say, "I have a huge problem. Your exam is the same day as the exams for 2 of my other classes. I really need to postpone your exam until the next week. This problem must be dealt with." Your professor might say, "Well, I'm sure it will be really tough to take the 3 exams on the same day, but this is college, and that's just the way things are. I don't see why I need to change anything for you." The point is that what one person views as a problem, another person simply sees as a fact of life. People tend to jump to finding solutions without taking the time to fully address the starting point, the problem that they're trying to solve. There are 2 important issues when it comes to understanding the starting point, defining the problem. First, as in the midterm example, people can disagree over whether a problem actually exists. Before you can argue about how to solve a particular problem, You first need to convince yourself about why you think the issue you've brought up needs to be solved. Second, people often fail to define the problem clearly. If the problem isn't clearly defined, then a group of people may think that they're addressing the same issue when in reality each person has a different view of what the group is talking about. You learned about the importance of using clear and precise language in arguments. Apply the same rules to how you describe the problem itself. So what is a problem and how do we know when we have one? One way to think about it is to see a problem as the difference between what is and what could or should be. That is, most people see something as a problem when they look at the way the world is and think, gee, things really should be different. One important reason for disagreement over problems is that people have different views on what things should be like. You think you should not have to have 3 exams on one day. The way the world is wrong. On the other hand, your professor thinks that it's simply a fact of life in college. The way the world is seems just fine to him. Once you've concluded that you do have a problem, then you must clearly define it. Poorly defined problems, like poorly articulated arguments, leave way too much room for everyone to hear what they want to hear and interpret the problem however they want to. Consider, for example, if a person said, "We have a problem with guns in this country." What does that really mean? Can you tell with certainty what the problem actually is? One person might interpret that as meaning that there are too many guns overall. Someone else might think it speaks to illegal gun ownership. And yet another might assume the speaker is talking about gun violence. A problem with guns is not really giving a clear definition of a problem. It doesn't specifically say anything about the way things are compared with a specific idea of the way things should be. A clearer problem identification might be if that person said, "We have a problem in this country. There are too many people killed by guns. No one should have to worry about being shot to death." From that statement, you can break down the assessment of how things are, many people being killed, versus how things should be, no one should be killed by guns. Then the next steps in problem solving can be undertaken. Analyze the problem, formulate and evaluate possible solutions, and choose one or more actions. As you can see, it is important to make sure you pay close attention to the starting point for problem solving, defining the issue or problem you need to address. If you can't clearly identify the problem, then it will be impossible to fairly evaluate the argument. And if you do not take the time to explain the problem and why it's viewed as a problem to begin with, you will likely have a hard time convincing anyone to go along with your conclusion. Why implement a solution for a problem that doesn't exist? It is important to apply critical thinking skills to evaluating the way things are in order to determine whether a problem exists and what the specific nature of that problem is.